received such a question in such a while. It has been a while since I've received such a question, but it basically means those that were born in the 70s and 80s. Actually, no, those that were college students in the 70s and 80s, and who were during the political the government that was run by the military when they had a lot of student protests, and they became more politically involved in their 30s. So these are it's 386 because they were in their 30s and politically active in their during the 80s. So that's why they call it.
Thank you very much.
And if you remember correctly, the song that Bumps and Pirates were playing was criticizing that generation for now being part of the establishment. So that was the relevance of the singer. So, yeah. Anyway, another question?
How many hours of footage? Because that was shot over 2 years?
Almost. No, more than 2 years, yeah.
So, like, what's the period of time you shot? Like, how many raw hours of footage did you have?
네, 2010년부터 2013년 초까지 촬영했고요.
Okay, so he filmed the movie. The documentary was filmed from 2010 to 2013 for a period of 3 years.
정확한 시간은 지금 잘 기억이 나지 않고요. 하도 용량으로 한 5테라 정도.
So the footage was about 5 terabytes, but he doesn't exactly remember exactly how much, but approximately 5 terabytes worth of footage.
Did he edit it all himself?
80% 정도 혼자 촬영했어요.
80%.
As a writer from New York and also involved in the Occupy movement, and then I just landed in Korea 5 days ago and picked Hongdae as my home for the next 3 months. So I cannot tell you just how touching this whole thing to me. I don't think my eyes were dry for 1 minute. So thank you very much for doing this. And I think I would very much like to know about the genesis of the project and what, like the latest, like anything has happened since then. Maybe, have you heard the whole thing?
Let me tell you this. 뉴욕에서 온 작가신데 지금 서울에서 1,000개 정도 세금 하시면서 아무래도 알아가는 거였는데 그 도큐멘터리를 보시면서 상당히 눈이 마를 시간이 왔었다. 인간적으로 많이 거기 마음 많이 감동하셨다 얘기하시고 근데 이제 이러한 프로젝트를 시작하게 된 계기가 어떤 게 있었고 이제 그런 어떻게 시작되는지 Did you want to continue with your question?
Just a simple follow-up. I think the question was posed toward the follow-up, the piece that we missed about art and politics and where these two intersect. I think art, of course, as a writer, and then musicians, artists, like art is trying to say something. So a lot of times, especially this moment in time, I think politics is like probably the utmost thing on our mind. So does the director have anything to say about art and politics and how do we do them together separately? Thank you so much again.
일단 다시 한번 감사드리고 그리고 예술과 정치에 연관을 시켜놓은 상황에서 본인 작가로서 예술의 관심이 많고 아주 많지만 그것을 정치와 부합시키고 결합시키는 것에 대한 민감한 부분이 있잖아요. 그런 걸 어떻게 하시는지 그러면서 정치를 결합시키는 부분이라는 작품에 대해서 작품 활동에 대해서
제가 다큐멘터리를 처음 만들게 된 건, 만든 계기가 된 건, 제가 2000년대 이제 청와대 홍대 쪽에 살고 있다가 임대료가 올라서 그 연남동이라는 곳으로 이사를 갔거든요.
So I was living in the Hongdae district, but in 2000, because of the prices had gone up too high, so he had to relocate to a place called Yeonnam-dong, which is nearby.
2010년도쯤에 서울시장이 오세훈 시장이었는데 오세훈 시장이 연남동을 차이나타운으로 재개발한다고 해서 재개발이 되면 그 동네를 떠나야 되니까 그때 스트레스를 받고 있습니다.
So after he relocated to Yeonnam, this place called Yeonnam-dong, in 2010, the mayor of Seoul mayor was Oh Se-hun, but because of his new plan to put Chinatown in Yeonnam-dong, was starting to come up. The idea had come up, and so he realized that he needed to move again.
연남동 길 건너편에 도리반 식당이 있었고 도리반 식당에서 홍대 음악가들이 모여서 공연을 한다는 얘기를 듣고 촬영을 하러 가게 되었습니다.
Across the street from where he was living in Yeonnam-dong was where Duriban was, the restaurant in the documentary, and he heard about how the musicians were coming to do a performance, and that's how he came to this documentary.
첫 촬영을 하던 날 영화에 나오는 한밭 야마가타 텍스트가 홍대에서 밀려나는 철거민의 처지와 홍대에서 밀려나는 음악가들의 처지가 다르지 않다라는 얘기를 했었고 그 얘기를 듣고 이 얘기는 음악 다큐멘터리, 장편 다큐멘터리로 만들어야 되겠다고 생각했습니다.
So when he went to Duriban and met with some of the musicians, as in the documentary Hanbat, and I think it was a different name in English, but he met the musicians and he realized that a lot of these musicians were experiencing the same thing, and that's when he decided that he must do this.
그다음 질문이 예술과 정치. 오른쪽 보고 있을까요?
Get glass water.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, I can.
예술과 정치와의 문제는 모든 예술가들이 같이 예술과 정치, 예술 활동과 정치 활동을 같이 병행하기가 쉽지 않은 것 같습니다. 예술가들이 예술 활동과 정치 활동을 같이 하기가 쉽지 않은 것 같습니다.
It's difficult for artists. I think it's difficult for artists to be involved in artistic work and political activities at the same time.
사회적인 문제에 관심을 가지고 작품 활동을 하는 예술가들은 항상 어떤 정치적인 문제에 관심을 가지고 정치적인 활동을 하게 되지만 정치적인 활동에 비중을 두느냐 작품 활동에 비중을 두느냐 어느 쪽에 비중을 더 많이 두느냐에 따라서 작품의 퀄리티가 달라진다는 생각을 하고 있습니다.
If you're involved in social work, work that's not art, it's easy to incorporate politics. It's not, but as an artist, it's difficult to put the two together. And I think that you can either go to one side, so you can be more. It can either be more political and less artistic, or more artistic and less political. You've got to make choices of how much we will incorporate in the artistic work that you're making. And if the more you try to involve politics into your work, the less artistic it becomes, and vice versa. So that's how I see the idea of how, your question of how art and politics come together.
파티 51에 나오는 음악가들은 음악을 잘하기 위해서 자기 음악 생산 조합을 만들었습니다.
In Party 51, they made a union to get involved in this political work.
하지만 정치적인 활동, 시위, 집회에 많이 나가서 공연을 하게 되면서 자신들이 원래 하고 싶었던 음악 활동과는 조금 달라진 자신들의 모습을 발견하고 다시 음악 활동에 더 매진하려고 하는 어떤 움직임을 영화 속에서 보여주는데요.
When they formed the union and they started to perform on site, it was they realized after starting the performance and being musicians on site through the performance, they realized that it was more than a performance, and it was actually a very heavily political activity that they were getting involved in. And during the process of that, they realized how big of a political charge that they were getting through their performances. But in the documentary, it's trying to show that they were trying to be more musicians rather than political through the movement. So they try to remove the politics out. So that's their attempt to become more purely musicians as opposed to political activists.
영화 속에서 다시 할게요. 음악가들 중에서 정치적인 활동을 우선으로 생각하는 음악가들과 음악 활동을 우선으로 생각하는 음악 활동을 우선으로 생각하는 음악가들은 지금은 많이 갈라져서 다른 길을 가고 있습니다.
So among the performers, among the musicians, they divided into two different parties almost. So there were those that aimed more to become musicians and artists, and there were those that became more politically involved and became more politically active. And those artists or those musicians are going separate ways now. They've actually divided into two different ways.
음악 활동과 예술 활동과 정치 활동을 비슷한 퍼센테이지로 균형을 잘 잡는 것이 중요한 것 같습니다.
I personally think it's important to find a balance between the political involvement and the artistic work that you put into the performance as musicians.
Yeah, over here.
Thanks. I really enjoyed this documentary, and in particular the spirit of the music and the spirit of the young people that came through. And for me, living in Korea as a foreigner, it was the first time that I really got an inside glimpse of a kind of youth movement, a kind of counterculture movement, and I'm curious to know if you think this type of countercultural movement is still strong, and if so, where is it, if not in Duriban anymore?
이런 한국에서 사시는 여러분들께서 이런 다큐멘터리를 거의 처음 접한 것 같은데 굉장히 젊은 사람들의 활동과 왕성한 음악 세계를 보고 되게 많이 새로웠고 반문화적인 반대중적인 모습이라고 생각이 드는데 그것이 아직까지도 있는지 아직까지 얼마나 이게 성장하거나 효과가 커지고 있는지 없는 소리가 있는지 이런 문화의 세계를 지금 처음 보셨어요. 지금 현재는 어떤지.
불반 이후로 지금 6년이 지났는데
It's been 6 years since Duriban was demolished.
불반에서 만들어진 음악가들의 모임이 구성원들은 달라졌지만 떠난 사람도 있고 새로 들어온 사람도 있고 네 있습니다.
So So the musicians and the performance that you saw in the documentary, although it's already been 6 years, the union still exists, and some have left and some have joined, so it's still very much existent.
작년에 한남동, 이태원 한남동에 테이크아웃 드로잉이라는 건물이 테이크아웃 드로잉,
Yeah. Take-out drawing. Yeah.
네, 그 강남스타일 사이 아시죠? 그 사이가 건물주의 강남스타일 사이가 건물주 발음 잘안 네, 그 건물주가 세입자들을 테이크아웃 드로잉이라는 그 미술관 카페를 쫓아내려고 해서 저기 소송이 났어요. 작년에 났었거든요. 그 건물에 음악가들이 80밴드가 모여서 일주일 동안 공연을 한 적이 있습니다. 네, 80밴드. 네.
And recently, last year, in Itaewon, there was a building called Takeout Drawing, which was also, it was owned by another, the owner was someone else, but they were asking the tenants to evacuate. So because there was another a lawsuit going because of in that building, 80 bands got together and did another performance.
I want to point out the owner was, as he said, directly. Psy was involved in the ownership, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, he was not joking.
Yeah, so he was saying that Gangnam Style, he was being, I think, Gangnam Style, the singer of Gangnam Style, he didn't mention any names, so I didn't know who it was. Gangnam Style, he is the owner of the building?
It's a little bit more complicated than that. Like the dispute predates his involvement, but he was one of the names involved in the project. There's news articles online that are better to ask than us.
그리고 지금 뭐 다들 아시겠지만 박근혜 퇴진을 요구하는 시위가 광화문에서 벌어지고 있는데요. 거기서도 많은 음악가들, 영화에 나왔던 많은 음악가들이 거기서 공연을 하고 있습니다.
So one other thing to note is that during the protest right now, because of President Park in Gwanghwamun, many of the musicians are now there performing as well.
Yeah, tonight, 10 p.m. in front of Lee Sun-shin statue is there are like 3 or 4 bands playing, so I might check it out. So yeah. Anyway, I'd like to add a bit to this answer if he's not done, when he's finished though. Okay. One other place that you could see a little bit of mention in the documentary, a lot of the people from Hongdae were moving across the river to an area called Muledong. And in the movie, Pak Da-ham and some of those people had started a place called Low Rise. And that place is long gone, but now there are several other live music venues in Mule. And it's especially become known for like loud music, like heavy metal, hardcore, and punk, and things like that. But the Jari people also have their headquarters in a photo studio in Chungmuro. So I think they've started putting on shows again, but they don't do it too much. The guy I mentioned in the presentation at the start, Park Jong-gun, owns this photo studio, and sometimes he lets people put on shows there. The equipment from that place was what was being used at takeout drawing. So during the takeout drawing protest, they stopped having shows, but I think they're back. But there's places all over the city. Like it used to be just Hongdae, and then around the time of Duriban, it was kind of a breaking point, and the music scene just fragmented out all over the place. So it's not centralized anymore. Hard to find, let's just say. So yeah.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Question. Speaking of the Park Geun-hye, the current protests, you know, like a big part of that for me that I was interested about is how like the mainstream media, the big news outlets, are covering that now when they hadn't really done that before. So I was just wondering if he feels that there would be more awareness about, the kind of like workers' rights and protest movements, if he feels a kind of hope for that, connected with the current Park Geun-hye protests, or if he thinks it's just a very separate thing, or
지금 아까에서 많이 나와서 질문을 했는데 이제는 미국의 주요 방송사들도 다 합세해서 이제 취재를 하고 기사화하잖아요. 이렇게 이제 모든 이제 주변이나 중요한 영향들을 모두 다 취재하고 있는 상황에서 그 자체가 이러한 비주류 음악가들의 삶의 희망적인지 아니면 과거의 문제라고 생각하시는 거예요. 박근혜 퇴진 운동과 이러한 문화 세계에 희망을 주는 그런 연관이 있다고 생각하시는지
지금 말씀하신 게 이제 주요 미디어에서 이렇게
So just to see if we understood the question correctly, so you're saying that the mainstream media is now dealing with the Park Geun-hye situation, and that they were as opposed to before when they weren't, right?
It's a protest movement that's getting more national attention
Right.
by large media outlets, which
And so how does that relate to the non-mainstream musicians, right? That's
Yeah.
what.
이런 어떤 큰 정치의 변화가 비주류 음악가들의 삶에 직접적인 영향을 끼치지 않을 수도 있습니다.
I don't believe that this kind of massive political movement will have any direct impact on such musicians.
그렇지만 최근에 블랙리스트라는 블랙리스트 혹시 들어보셨는지 모르겠는데
You've heard about the blacklist recently?
한국 정부에서 예술가들 900명 정도의 블랙리스트를 작성해서 각종 지원 제도에서 불이익을 받도록 비밀리에 그렇게 시행한 적이 있습니다.
The government has a blacklist of approximately 900 musicians.
900명, 네.
900 musicians that
예술가들.
예술가들, 음악하는 사람.
아니라 모든 예술가들.
so all artists, not just musicians, but 900 artists are on this blacklist. And if you are on this blacklist, then you will be put at a disadvantage for any grants or any favors that could be granted to their projects and their work. And so this is a new thing that has come up.
그 900명의 예술가들 중에 대부분은 정치적인 활동, 사회 비판적인 활동을 많이 해온 비주류 예술가들입니다.
So most of these 900 artists are mostly politically very active or very critical of the government and mostly non-mainstream artists.
박근혜 대통령
Sorry. It's not 900, it's 9,000.
So I guess the correction is it's not 900 but 9,000 artists.
박근혜 퇴진을 시킨다고 해서 세상이 많이 바뀔이라고는 생각지 않지만 블랙리스트 같은 불이익을 받지 않기 위해서 박근혜 퇴진을 원하고 있고요.
I don't believe that Park's coming down from office will bring radical change or have direct impact on these artists. But at the same time, she does need this list, this blacklist. In order for this blacklist not to survive its original function, she will have to. I mean, that will be the only way that we can prevent this list from from staying alive.
그리고 두리반과 테이크아웃 드로잉을 거친 예술가들의 주요한 원칙은 도시 재개발과 gentrification 문제에 있습니다.
And the biggest issue, the biggest political issue that the musicians at Duriban and Takeout Drawing are fighting against is mostly redevelopment, urban redevelopment, and gentrification of the different districts.
테이크아웃 드로잉 미술가들을 쫓아내려고 했던 사이의 소속사는 YG 엔터테인먼트입니다.
And the owner of Takeout Drawing, the building, is Psy, and Psy is part of YG, which is one of the three biggest music producers in Korea.
And they're about to come into severe fire as part of the Chae Soon-sil scandal. The head of YG is very close with Jon Dunbar, who's one of the guys from the Secret Cabal.
박근혜 정권의 비선 실세 최순실 차은택 라인과 YG 엔터테인먼트가 긴밀한 관계에 있었다는 사실들이 드러나고 있고요. 그런 최순실도 강남의 그 부동산을 통한 강남의 강남 부동산 투기를 통해서 많은 부를 축적한 사람이고, YG도 홍대에서 부동산 투기를 통해서 홍대에서 젠트리피케이션을 가속화시키는 그런 자문입니다. 그래서 테이크아웃 드로잉과 둘반을 거친 예술가들은 그 YG, 최순실, 박근혜 라인을 많이 주목하고 있습니다.
So, as we all may know, Chae Soon-sil has been able to acquire so much wealth because of her investment in lands in the Gangnam area, and there's because of the relationship that John was talking about, Chae Soon-sil and Chae and Park Geun-hye, all of this line, that's and Takeout Drawing is one of the reasons for protests. At the same and while Chae Soon-sil was making money with investments in the Gangnam area, YG also a major part of his capital was earned through his investments in the Hongdae area and the gentrification of that area. So, as you can see, they're very closely related, and what they're going against, what they're fighting against, is very closely related to to YG Entertainment and to Soon-sil right now.
Now I have a comment and a question. First of all, at the very end of the movie, one of the scenes was from a concert where they were performing in front of a screen showing the results of the presidential election with Park Geun-hye coming in, which was like even more sinister now than ever, I think. I'm curious, I did check, I poured through the blacklist and I found that Yoo Chae-rim is on it and Jung Yong-taek is on it. I asked Yoo Chae-rim and he about it if he knew, and he said yes and kind of laughed a little bit. But I was wondering, have you felt any effects from being on the blacklist? And what did you first think when you realized that you were on a government blacklist of artists?
블랙리스트 있다는 걸 알고 계시나요? 그래서 그걸 알게 됐을 때
아니, 크게 놀라지는 않았습니다.
I was not surprised.
That you're not aware of any direct effects from being on the blacklist also?
그렇게 돼서 그렇게 그 리스트에 있어서 어떤 영향이 있었는지 혹시 내가 이렇게 리스트에 있어서 이런 부담이 있었구나 하고 그런 어떤 리스트에 있음으로써의 본인한테 있어서 임팩트가 있었는지
제가 지금 새롭게 만들고 있는 다큐멘터리가 다큐멘터리로 올해 제작 지원에서 다 떨어졌거든요.
So the new documentary that he's preparing at the moment, he has not been able to receive any grants, or his proposals have all failed to get grants.
It's pretty major.
제가 준비가 부족해서 떨어졌다고 생각을 하고 있었고 지금도 그렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다.
I think that it was due to my lack of preparation than anything else, and that's still what I think.
하지만 저처럼 블랙리스트에 있는 사람들이 어떤 경우라도 그런 불이익을 당할 수 있다는 사실은 굉장히 기분 나쁜 일이고 그 사실을 확인했을 때는 정말 어떻게 그 관계자들, 이 블랙리스트를 만든 관계자들을 정말 법의 심판을 받도록 해야 되겠다는 생각이 들었어요.
But it is very upsetting to know that there is such a list, and that those that are on the list will be at a disadvantage or be rejected for what they want to do and for their project, and that it's very important that whoever it was that made such a list should receive proper judgment by law.
Any other questions? Because I have another one. What's your next project?
아까 테이크아웃 드로잉 말씀드렸었는데 테이크아웃 드로잉과 강남스타일 사이와의 소송을 다룬 gentrification에 관한 다큐멘터리 젠틀맨은 없다라는 다큐멘터리를 지금 만들고 있습니다.
So just to say the title, I think he has a tentative title for this. Well, there is no gentleman, and he's trying to explain. Well, not explain. He's trying to demonstrate the relationship between Take outdrawing the building and Psy, and the gentrification of that area, and the involvement.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, we got a whole bunch more now. You haven't spoken yet, please.
아니 그 가로수길의 리스타 케이스는 미디어를 통해서 알았는데 이 싸이 거는 처음 들었는데 제가 몰랐던 건지 아니면 싸이 거는 좀 이렇게 보호를 받았던 건지 그냥.
작년 4월달부터 올 3월달까지 계속 소송이 진행됐었고요. 기사가 한 400개 이상 나왔었거든요. 작년에만. 검색하면 바로 보실 수 있을 텐데 사이가 직접 나서지는 않고 그 YG에 지금 양현석 회장이 와서 협상 같은 걸 진행하다가 이제 결렬되고 했었는데
So since last March to this March, about 400 articles have been written about takeout drawing. So if you were to do a search, they're sure to come up. Psy has never showed himself, directly at any of the hearings or any of the meetings, but it was usually Yang Hyun-seok, who was the CEO of YG Entertainment, that would come and try to negotiate his way out.
기사가 400개 나오면 390개가 사이와 양현석을 입장을 옹호하는 기사였어요.
So out of the 400 articles, about 390 of them would be in support of Yang Hyun-seok and Psy.
많은 연예 뉴스에서 사이가 세입자들한테 갑질을 당하고 있다라는 기사가 많이 나왔었죠.
And most of these articles were about how the tenants, Psy's tenants, would usually be the bully, as opposed to Psy being, as opposed to the other way around. It's called destructive in Korean, if you know, when you bully as being you're the more dominant party of the two.
올 3월달에 PD 수첩에서 사이와 테이크아웃 사태를 방송을 했었고요. 그게 공중파에서 처음이었어요. 올 3월달.
So this March there was a documentary on a major broadcast about takeout drawing inside, and that was the first time that it came out. It was exposed on the media.
PD 수첩에서 방송되고 난 다음에 여론이 바뀌었고 사이와 YG에서 와서 사과를 하고 합의를 하고 근무를 깨웠습니다.
So after this documentary was released on television in March, YG Entertainment CEO and Psy came to apologize, and they moved out.
On the subject of the entertainment industry, with the incredible explosion of Korean wave we are seeing, I think it's still going on. Do you see for the underground and indie artists they have through the reach of the internet and also the interest around the world with the Korean culture in general, that they have more exposure now or they have more platform? I see them garner interest in Japan, but maybe around the world as well. Do you see them having more opportunities as a result, like riding this wave or a spillover effect? Thank you.
일본까지 이러한 여러 가지 이슈들로 인해서 지금은 그들의 것에 노출돼서 알려지잖아요. 그러니까 일본에서도 알게 되고 이런 효과가 일본뿐만이 아니라 전 세계적으로 크리라고 하는데 이런 음악가들도 전 세계적으로 좀 이렇게 노출이 되어지고 있는지 다른 알려지게 되는지.
일본에 간 것처럼 한국의 그 한류 메이저 한류처럼 그렇게 그렇게 많이 알려지게 이렇게 미디어에서 많이 노출되는 한류처럼 그렇게 유명세를 타고 세계적으로 알려지고 있지는 않지만 그들만의 리그가 있는 것 같습니다. 네, 그들만의 리그가 있는 것 같습니다.
They're not they don't get as much exposure as other so-called K-pop musicians, but he's calling it a league of their own. There is some exposure among the industry or among the musicians themselves.
몇 달 전에도 일본에서 아시아 평화를 기원하는 음악가들의 콘서트가 열렸었거든요.
So a few months ago, there was a concert in Japan among these musicians who got together to promote peace within the Asian region. That was the mission for the performance.
대만, 일본, 중국, 한국 등에서 모인 인디 음악가들이 수십 개 밴드가 며칠 동안 아시아 평화를 위한 콘서트를 했습니다.
So musicians from Taiwan and Korea, Japan, and China got together and so many bands got together in Japan for peace in Asia.
그 음악가들이 자국에서는 다 비주류 음악가로 활동을 하고 있지만 국제적으로 그러한 네트워크를 만들어 나가 그런 네트워크들을 활발하게 만들어 나가고 있는 것 같습니다.
So although all of these musicians at this concert were the so-called non-mainstream bands and musicians, but they are finding ways to connect and network globally and informing these kind of gatherings and concerts and performances.
I want to say, sorry, I want to add something a little controversial to that actually. I do think that like there has been, every year has been more and more indie bands touring overseas, and I really do think the pivot moment was Gangnam Style. I hate to say it, but that was not part of Hallyu, and it just made a lot of people realize there was more to Korea than just K-pop. And it really did open a lot of doors. Like South by Southwest started receiving more and more Korean acts. They called them K-pop, but they mostly weren't K-pop. But there has been a bit of a push, but you can't deny that a lot of the reasons that so many Korean bands are touring Europe and North America and everywhere else in the world is personal efforts, like through Zandari Festival and things like that. So there's been a little bit of, synergy, but maybe not so much. Yeah, just wanted to add that. So, sorry.
파티 51 잘 봤습니다. 수고 많이 하셨고요. 홍대 하면은 이제 예전에는 그 인디의 메카라고 할 정도로 많이 뮤지션들이 많이 활동하고 있는 걸로 알고 있었는데 지금은 이제 많이 변한 걸로 알고 있습니다. 관광객이 이제 많이 오다 보니까 인디 문화가 이제 많이 나가고 아까 그 뮤지션 여기서도 나왔지만은 이 임대료가 올라가다 보니까 많이 빠지고 이제 관광객이 많이 찾는 그런 업소로 많이 이제 전환이 됐다고 이제 얘기 들었어요. 지금 현재 남아 있는 게 그 인디 그 뮤지션들이 얼마나 되는지 대략 좀 알고 싶습니다.
그 수치는 정확하게 알고 있는 사람이 거의 없을 것 같은데 두리반 2010년도에 두리반 투쟁이 한참일 때 5만이라고 얘기한 사람이 있긴 있었거든요.
So the question was, are there still indie bands in the Hongdae area? It's become very touristy, and there are a lot more just regular restaurants. And the answer was, he doesn't think no one knows exactly how many bands are still playing, but just the recent statistics would say about 50,000 bands.
50,000 bands?
50,000 musicians.
Okay, yeah.
50,000 musicians.
5만 있었나?
네. 90년대에 홍대 인디 문화가 생겨날 때는 주류와는 다른 음악을 하기 위한 활동을 인디라고 했었는데요.
So in the 90s, when the Hongdae district first came about and musicians began to start their work, their activities, the term indie music came out because they were specifically non-mainstream.
지금은 TV에 인디 밴드들이 나와서 경연하는 프로그램이 많지 않습니까? 그런 프로그램들을 통해서 주류가 되려고 하는 음악가들이 마이너에 있을 때는 인디라고 하기 때문에 인디와 주류의 경계, 상업과 비상업의 경계가 지금은 모호한 것 같습니다.
But as you know, there are a lot more television shows that are run for indie music in specifics, and there's a lot more. There are a lot more songs that can be categorized as being indie, and that are very popular. And so it's very difficult. It's the distinction to make to say that indie is non-mainstream as opposed to mainstream music is kind of we're on the border of indie music not becoming so much of a non-mainstream category, and so there's really not much of that distinction anymore now.
그래서 인디가 힘들고 어렵고 그런 음악 활동을 하는 사람들을 예전에 가리키는 그런 용어이기도 했다면 지금은 하나의 상품으로서 TV를 통해서 주류가 될 수 있는 어떤 상품으로서의 상품을 의미하는 단어가 된 부분도 있습니다.
So now, in the term indie music has become more commercialized, and that there is hope for indie music to become more of a mainstream type of music, and that it's not the non-commercial versus commercial distinction is no longer valid.
website 있어요?
페이스북,
He has a Facebook page.
파티51 페이스북.
It's Party51 is the Facebook page.
Is there a link to see other documentaries he's done?
다른 다큐멘터리 하신 거에 대한 내용이
자세히는 안 나와 있습니다.
Not in detail.
I think if there's no more questions, we might have to start to think about wrapping it up here. Is there one last question? Does anyone have anything that we want to ask before we finish up here today? Okay, well, can we get a very big round of applause? And as well for John and for our translator today as well for your music. So thank you very much. And thank you all for coming today. And remember, if you're interested in Korean literature, please come back tomorrow at 4 p.m. and meet Kim Soom, Kim Geum-hee, and Kim Bi-wall. And thanks again, guys. Take care.
He was saying something about how we might be trying to rework the English subtitles. I want to know if he's doing that because I want to help.